Okay, so this is the panel. This is the bit where I get to sit down and other people talk, so that's awesome. So on the panel, we have Doug Hare from Outplay Entertainment. We have Matthew Jack, who you heard from during the open mic session from Moon Collider, Jamie Cross from Team Junkfish, and Kate Ho from Tiger Face Games. So we're going to be talking about GDC and what these guys... So these guys are the chosen few who went. So they get to tell you guys how awesome.
We paid another example. So chosen. So special.
So I probably should have come prepared with questions, and I didn't. So why don't we just go down and have you introduce yourselves and say a little bit about why you went to GDC, because of what you do and kind of what you were hoping to get out of it.
So I'm Doug Hare. I've been making the games for a long time. Started on Commodore 64 in '86. I've been in the games industry ever since. I'm completely unemployable outside of the games industry. Choose carefully. And I have a company, it's the main studio in Dundee, called Outplay. We have close to 60 people there, including here, making free-to-play games for mobile devices. And I've been a card-carrying member of the IGDA for 18 years. I've been to GDC about 10 or 11 times. And the reason I went to this year and last year is because it's just, for me, it's a really good way of meeting people in a convenient space. I mean, a lot of shows end up being like that. A lot of people actually just go to San Francisco and don't even get a ticket to go to GDC and just meet people there in the lobbies of hotels and the like. But we got the Expo Pass and we hung around there, but it was mostly for meetings.
If anybody from UBM ever sees this video, no, nobody does that.
No. And that's why I always.
So, Matt.
I'm Matthew Jack. So I worked at Crytek for a few years on AI, and then I left to go and do AI under my own steam. I did contracting for a while, and then started on an AI middleware called Kythera. We were going to GDC both for the business and for the talks. One of my colleagues, Mike, has been doing this for a couple of years now. He went to GDC with me last year, but there's still, lots for him to learn about the industry and AI in particular. And we had another new hire, Ben, who had just been with us for a few months. So it was really important to get Ben especially over there, just to immerse him in the culture and everything. And we were going primarily for the AI Summit, which happens on the Monday and Tuesday before the rest of GDC. And so we were there mostly for that. We saw some talks in the following days and had some interesting business meetings.
Okay. Well, I'll be more serious this time. I'm Jamie Cross. I'm one of the directors of Team Junkfish. I've not been doing this very long comparatively. I only really graduated last year, so really this time last year I was panicking over my dissertation. We went to GDC mainly for the sort of business side of things, to meet with a few distributors, publishers, sort of mentioned earlier, and also just to see what all the fuss was about, I suppose, because it was our first time going out there. So it was quite an interesting experience. Good few meetings came out of it. It'd be fun to be back again.
So my name's Kate Ho. I run a small company just across the road called Tiger Face Games, and essentially we make educational games for kids on iPad and other kind of mobile devices. I mostly go to GDC. A lot of it's for business, but my favorite bit of the year is to get to go to the Indie Summit on Monday and Tuesday and basically totally geek out because people just have the most amazing talks about the way that it's just super creative, and people talking about the way that they make certain games, and that is one of the main ways that I get to hear about, get to understand the process of quite fairly small, self-contained and very creative-driven games, which fulfills me as a designer primarily. And then on the other side, so that's Monday and Tuesday, and on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday I have my business hat on, and I just go and try and make deals, make money. That's it, yeah, that's me.
Cool. So to give you guys a little bit of context, so these guys are going to be answering the questions, but the context for where the questions are going to be coming from. Hi, my name is Dickin. I'm a director of the IGDA, amongst many other things. This was my third GDC. It was my second GDC as a speaker. And I'm also in AI, which is why I can strong-arm my into doing stuff. So I was speaking as part of the AI Summit last year and again a little bit this year. Okay, so diving into questions about like what sort of, so first off, Kate, you were talking about sort of going to the Indie Summit, and it sounds like you didn't see any talks Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. What was the best talk you saw at the Indie Summit? What was going on there?
Well, the one that really stood out for me was a guy made a game called Save the Date, and I like it because yeah, it's an awesome game, right? Yeah. So he basically talks about oh man, it's the most meta game ever. If anyone has seen The Butterfly Effect with Ashton Kutcher, it's a little bit like that. It's like a Groundhog Day thing where you play, you go on a date. You don't really get to choose your date, but you get to choose. You have a conversation, and it's basically just super simple. Starts with the phone ringing, and it says, you know, hey, where are we going to go? Are we going to the burger place, the Thai place, or I don't know, going to, I don't know, wherever, right? And whatever you do, whatever choices you make, your date always dies. And then you start the game, it's basically, oh, let's go to a Thai place. Yep, go to a Thai place, have like some really boring, well, kind of interesting banter, and you click through some stuff, and then it basically goes, oh, what would you like to have? You kind of go, right, well, let's go and have the pad thai. And then it turns out, the next thing you see is, your date is, you know, has an allergy to peanuts. You forgot to warn her about this. She dies. And then you kind of start the game again, and you go to the burger place, and it turns out that group of robbers burst into place, and you die. Your date dies. You die. You actually stay alive. So the whole idea, without spoiling it for anyone, is that you've got to. Anyway, but the talk was brilliant because he was talking about how in the games in games and narrative in games, a lot of the time people are very explicit, and if you look at films like the Blair Witch Project, where a lot of the time it's a lot of the fear is inferred, and if we can, that's one thing that we could take inside making really cool narrative-based games or more immersive-based games, which is can you create scenarios where you almost break the fourth wall? And so without spoiling the game, the whole idea is that, well, I am going to spoil the game. I'm just going to tell you, because otherwise I can't make my point, which is the only way to save your day is to convince her that she's a computer games character. So you kind of break that fourth wall and convince her not to ever go on a date with you ever, and that she's a collection of pixels altogether. Anyway, so it's really, really meta. That's my favourite talk.
Andrew, when we come to put this on video, can we get a spoiler warning graphic just before that?
Like giants.
Cool.
Huh? Oh yeah, the game's free to download and across multiple platforms. You just play it. It takes 10 minutes.
Cool. So nobody else gave me anything that I could work with in terms of. You saw a lot of sessions. So did any of the three of you get to talks, or were you all busy doing the busy side?
I wanted to go to talks, but we kind of couldn't afford it that time round. But it's been interesting. So I've seen how many audio talks have happened over the past couple of years, especially I think Darren Cobb's one for Bastion was quite cool. It's one of the 3 ones if you ever want to see how they did their sort of audio design, music systems and narrative systems as well. But stuff like, I'd really have liked to go into the experimental gameplay session, in particular because there was a Dundee team there, Space Budgie, who do Glitch Space, we graduated with them, they're quite good friends of ours, I'd like to say. But it's knowing that another team who we graduated with from Dundee is just like up there with all these people and big names, just like, cool. That makes it quite, I don't really what I'd say achievable, but that really kind of, I think that lessens what they've managed to do and are doing with what their game is. It's in early access actually, it's a $5 if you fancy going and spending some money. It's really cool and worth looking into. But yeah, like I'd really have loved to have went to that talk, especially even over the sort of audio ones, just to see what other people are sort of doing. I mean, they did sort of followed the live stream tweets, but it's not the same really. So yeah, ideally next time talks.
Anybody else?
I didn't get into any of the talks. I mean, as I say, I go out there primarily, or have done for years now, really, to sort of meet with other people from across the world in a sort of convenient format. But I mean, the interesting thing is that by virtue of talking to lots of people and just having serendipitous meetings and so on, you end up sort of developing an impression about what is trending within the industry. And it's been several years, the sort of watching the transition from where the sort of more traditional space where I came from in terms of the sort of console, sort of generations of consoles, and how that's sort of, that was the dominant part of the industry for the longest time, and sort of consumed most, along with PC, consumed most of what people were talking about at GDC, and then sort of seeing that starting to talk about mobile and social and free to play and things like that, and then out of nowhere, over the course of what is a very small number of years, gone from a sort of marginalised, almost poo-pooed, I'll never catch on kind of thing, to being a very dominant, if significant, if not dominant part of what people are chatting about now. And it's interesting, and thematically I would say that, we've really seen, indie is in, whether that's through Steam, whether that's through the fact that you've got the easiest ability to access an audience in the history of games, on mobile. Indie's definitely in. There's lots of challenges that come with that. Free to play is, I don't think anyone can really argue with it anymore. It's just a question of how to improve upon it and let it evolve. But I mean, literally 2 years ago, free to play, it was like, and I think everyone sort of kind of understands that free is difficult to compete with. Yeah. So those were two, I think, the big things for me, was just seeing that obviously you have the more novel, exotic technologies like Rift and Morpheus, sort of having a fairly significant presence there, and then all the services that have spun up around mobile, it's one thing to make a game, but then you have to figure out how to make money with it. How do you get an audience? How do you actually make it so that it's cross-platform? And so there's this huge explosion of companies around making services that you don't need to worry about anymore. So you can concentrate on making a game versus having to suddenly learn how to be a back-end programmer and do tons of server-side stuff and have a huge scalable back-end to allow your game to grow. You've seen this explosion of sort of soft back-end as a service companies, which is interesting too.
So Doug, on the business side, what do you think about the fact that Unreal were kind of, effectively what used to cost a lot of money to get an Unreal license is now what? Wasn't they talking about $19 plus, something?
Yeah. That was the biggest announcement of GDC for me, at least. I thought that was a real game changer.
And Crytek have done the same with theirs.
Yeah, $10 a month, I think.
$10 with no back end.
Something like that. I think the details still aren't clear, and they're also not making the source code available, as far as I've heard so far.
So do you think that's a big shift?
I think it's a big deal. I think especially making the source code available, it just opens things up so much for indie companies to use the engine more easily, but even to see how it's built, play with that code, improve it. I think that's a big shift.
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly for people that are, I suppose when you look at things like Unreal and Crytek Engine, CryEngine, you're looking at things that, in order to realise them fully, require man-years worth of effort for people to use that to make a thing that. No, that's great, and the fact that for certain types of developer, that's an amazing shift. But I think for people that are individuals or small teams, the being able to sort of really genuinely make the use of this extraordinarily man-centuries worth of effort that have gone into creating that tool chain and that engine, to then sort of try and do Flappy Bird with it. It seems like I mean, it's like where there are stuff. It's a huge hammer, and most of the ambition is a walnut, and so. So that's why for me, I suppose I didn't notice it as much, whereas for people, and I suppose because I've been out of the conventional side of the business for so long, it was less, felt less relevant. Most people seem quite content with 2D at the moment. They don't seem to be that.
I mean, comparatively, you've got things like, say, Game Maker, which you have your free option and pay option, but even things like Stencil and Construct and stuff like that are sort of low cost. And there's been a game I've been following, but I can't remember the name of it, but it's very Super Metroid-like, and the guy's been working with the guy who made Stencil to get a load of sort of shader stuff and back-end stuff in for it as well as this game's developing. So it's been interesting to see how even sort of small tool chains are adapting to their audiences as well, not just in terms of the bigger ones going, we've made this sort of subscription model quite cheap to access. Other ones are sort of implementing features that their audiences is looking for. So like you're saying, when you've got a big hammer with Unreal, some of the smaller ones are sort of tightening the screws as well, just to say, okay, we'll make this slightly better for you because you want it to work like that.
Yeah, and I mean, coming back to what you were saying earlier, nobody's going free, right? I mean, Unreal, Cry, you can't argue with free, and Unity is still free. So. You can make it work for free-ish.
Wait, are you?
See, because I think that you are actually the best people to give me feedback, especially on that Unreal. You see, there is one thing which I follow from the Develop magazine, which was sort of made an article after they sort of slashed this down to this subscription. And there is one thing, it's very attractive at $19 a month, like a subscription fee. But eventually, if you decide to publish the games, you have to pay them like a 5% of your revenue. And I thought you will be actually, you 4 or 5 will be actually the best people to ask this question, because the journalists actually evaluate that for the indie developers developing studios, this might be actually quite expensive, because after you cut all your expenses, the 5% from the profit should be still quite a lot. So would you give me feedback on that? Would you still find it attractive even with those 5% out of your game?
What are you trying to do?
Can we just repeat the question for the
Yes, I suppose the question is it a good deal?
Yes,
yeah.
Is it a good deal?
Is it a good deal? Do you know how much money it would cost to make Unreal? Millions and millions of dollars. So I suppose you've got the buy or build. I'm going to get for $20 a month, millions of dollars worth of technology. And if the game you're building needs what that does, that's a really good deal. If you can do it using Game Salad or Game Studio, then there are alternatives. So it comes down to the problem you're solving for. It can solve a lot of very complex problems in a way that virtually no other technology can. It's accessible to you. So for $20 a month, that's an extraordinary deal. 5% of the back end. If you want to put down the millions of dollars up front to make your own technology, you can get rid of the 5% fee at the end. So I think it's an amazing deal. Assuming that you need that size of hammer.
So if I understand what you answered, you're sort of saying it depends on the franchise you want to actually.
Yeah, if you're making Flappy Bird, then it's a bad call. But it's true, right? I mean, if you want to make a massive third-person action adventure with best-of-class particle effects editing and animation and facial animation and streaming and multi-platform and every other part of the system that you get within that, then there are a very limited number of choices.
I would think my impression is that the 5% would end up feeling pretty expensive. So, you know, assuming that you need an engine of that kind of scale in the first place and that you set off developing it, could end up pretty expensive. But I guess I'm expecting that most people who sign up to the subscription, they just want to be developing games. They're not too worried about, you know, actually making a profit from it at the end of the day. Some studios maybe will regret the choice later, but on the other hand, if they've had some success with it and they have some profits, then, you know, that's a great place to be, and then they can maybe even negotiate a better deal after that.
Well, remember, if you make $1 million, is it gross or net?
Gross.
Right, so that's gross. And so say the game does $1 million gross, you're paying 50,000 as a royalty. For using a technology that's cost tens of millions of dollars to make. I mean, it's not it seems like a not terrible deal. You spend.
You don't really have much else.
So let's move on from getting bogged down in engine wars.
You know, the thing about there is no such thing as an engine war, because the reality is that there's no one solution that answers. You know,
absolutely. Yeah.
That's the thing. It's not like you can. It's not like you go. Well, of course, there's that. You know, utopia technology over there that does everything that's free.
I'd be interested to ask. I'd be interested to ask you actually, Luke. How much of a challenge do you think Unreal is to Unity now?
It's a very interesting question that we could spend the rest of the panel talking about. And I don't have any questions, so let's do that.
Well, this gentleman had a question.
I think the big thing is that it's changing the landscape, and Unity has to hit back somehow. So it is a challenge. I think that Doug's point about the right hammer for the right thing, like I will put my hand up and say that they've got my $20. Mostly because I want to learn how it works, because that's going to enhance my employability down the line. Am I going to make some, you know, I'm not running out and changing my engine over from Unity to Unreal because I can now get my hands on Unreal. At the same time, I'm looking down the line and saying, okay, well, if this one works and if that one works, then maybe game 3, we can do something with Unreal there and utilize some of the power there. And that's a reasonably viable concept now, whereas before I would have been a bit kind of wary of it. I think it's interesting, and I think the most interesting thing is what's going to happen next. Because Unreal slashes their price, Unity kind of is on the back foot. Today they've gone off and picked up... so they're now looking at maybe gaming as a service as something that they can add value elsewhere. It's making the landscape very competitive, and anything that's making competitive stuff on the SDK side, that's good for indies. So that would be my kind of take on it. But there was a question.
Yeah, about 6 years ago, everyone was saying, like, make games, not engines, right? And then this year at GDC, Splash Damage is like, we've got this great engine and this great particle system, and Unreal is like, nobody's buying Unreal 4 anymore. Really. Everyone's still on Unreal 3. So is it now better to like build your own engine? It seems like it's a totally viable thing if you have a lot of money. It might actually save you money.
But what game are you trying to build? What game are you trying to build?
I'm not building games.
He's trying to make money.
So but the point being is that if you're wanting to make money, you can make money really, really simply by doing simple games. There's lots of simple games that make money. So it depends on whether, you know, what's the goal.
Also, what technology do you need for it?
Yeah.
Like, a friend of mine's working on a game which is entirely voxel based, and he's built all the technology around that. And I imagine you could sort of make it work in Unreal, but I think it would be pretty awkward.
But I think that's always been the case. I don't think that ever goes away. It's just that people don't realise it. You know, I mean, the majority of games in the traditional space for years, there were more sort of dominant technologies, but pretty much every studio, if you think back, I mean, the company I had in the States, we had our own technology. It still exists. That studio got acquired by Amazon relatively recently, and they're using basically the technology. There's an evolutionary path from 1997 to today of that technology that Amazon just acquired as part of taking part of Foundation 9. So there was countless technologies constantly being in development. You just didn't know about them. Pretty much most independent large-scale studios had their own. Blitz down in the UK had them. Rebellion has their own technology. Most of the US indies all had their own technology. So there was always technology. The question was, if you were a new company about to start up and you wanted to start doing big, extravagant third-person or first-person games, do you want to spend the next 3 years building technology, or do you want to make a game? And so that's where that question comes in. But if you've already got kind of the technology, and I think that's why right now there's a lot of conversation about happy making your own technology, because the technology expectation, especially if you're doing 2D stuff, is so low. It doesn't take years to make it. You can get it off the ground and up and running to the point where you can ship something relatively quickly with a relatively modest amount of people.
I suspect popularity of Unity is not really it makes 2D a lot better. It's just because the mobile space is so diverse that makes it hard to do it on your own.
You know, I mean, we right now, the approach that we take at our company is to just use whatever tool is right, you know, for the job. So we're using Cocos, Adobe AirStack, we use Marmalade, you know, we've evaluated, we're totally technology agnostic. It's not whatever works for the project we're making.
I mean, I guess in practice, nobody actually builds an engine from scratch anymore anyway, right? There's so much
off-the-shelf stuff. Yeah.
There's so many middlewares available and open source components that really it's about pulling it all together and deciding what bit you're going to do differently to everybody else. But apart from, as far as having your own engine goes, if you do already have one, I had an interesting conversation with somebody, I think it must have been at GDC, who was saying how valuable it is if you do have your own technology, because you're avoiding the license fees. And basically, if you're a studio who can, you know, put out a great game and publishers are looking around, well, if they choose you and your tech is decent, then you've got a team who knows the technology really well, can adapt it for things, and they're not going to have to pay the license fee for using the technology.
Yeah.
And if you give up that engine and move to, say, Unreal, then you've lost that advantage, and you're kind of just, you know, another studio using Unreal, you lose that unique selling point.
But of course, the other technology, the thing about having your own technology is it's your own technology. So you don't run into dead ends or, have to wait for the next update, you know, and so on. So there are, you know, clear historical advantages to having your own technology, but there are lots of compelling reasons for using off-the-shelf technology.
One of the things I would say Unity has is a slight advantage over, say, Unreal just now as its asset store. So like the guys were saying, if there is a problem, chances are somebody's made a solution to it, and you could buy it for a couple of dollars and stuff like that. Are they going to do that soon?
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of the things that is Unity's strong point, and Unreal will be playing catch up on that. The sort of community side of things is pretty strong with Unity. None of them seem to get a decent audio engine working properly, so you need to get a middleware for it anyway. So yeah, if you're really looking to make money, see if you can do a really cheap alternative to Fmod or Wise. Have fun with that one. But yeah, it's interesting to see how, if any of the Unity asset mod developers will shift over to Unreal, or if they've seen enough sort of income coming out of that.
So, I mean, coming back to GDC a bit, because that's what we are supposed to be talking about. So Matt, so last year you were a speaker.
Yep.
This year you were not a speaker, but you were sort of trying to sell your middleware to people.
Yes.
How was that transition for you?
Well, first of all, it was a relief. All the preparation going into giving a talk at the AI Summit last year was, an awful lot of work and nerve-wracking at times. So it was nice not to have to worry about that and just enjoy the summit. I would encourage people to, you know, if you if you do go over to GDC, if you have an opportunity, then think about going to the summits, and the AI summit in particular. I think a lot of people just see like Wednesday through Friday.
So this is really interesting. So I mean, what Kate was saying earlier about the Indie Game Summit, so I get the same vibe from the IGDA, where they start talking about things and they're like, oh, nobody gets until Wednesday, and Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, those are the important days. And I'm like, because I've only been going for 3 years, I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? The Indie Game Summit is Monday, Tuesday. The AI, the audio stuff, like everybody's specialist things is Monday, Tuesday.
Yeah. I mean, I think the quality of the talks at the AI Summit was consistently high this year, and I think the summits often have kind of better quality talks than the average over the rest of the conference. For me, it's just a bit of a shame that there's things like the Indie Summit happening at the same time that I can't go to. There's a lot
Pocket Gamer, Connect, what's it called?
Games Connect.
Game Connect occurring on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday as well, so you've got overlapping conferences. So I was at that for a day and a half, and then into GDC, so I mean there's a lot going on. It's impossible to go all the things that you want to be able to go to.
Yeah.
Because was it last year? It was GDC right into PAX as well and stuff like that.
I think it was the year before.
Yeah. I mean, like I sort of mentioned, we at GDC then basically 2 days later we were travelling down to Resd, and it's not as tight a clash as say running right into next door, but if you are exhibiting at those things, it takes a hell of a lot out of you, especially when the bus journey is longer than your flight over to America.
So it's going to happen again next year as well?
Probably.
So actually you were right. Last year it was PAX that was adjacent. Year before it was South by Southwest. Next year it's going to be PAX. And yeah, these guys really need to start talking to each other. But so how, I mean your expectations going in, this was your first GDC and you're taking your game across.
Yeah.
So how did it meet your expectations, or how did it exceed / I mean, I guess there's some indie devs in the audience right now, or watching on the camera.
Yeah. We went across with the SDI, Scottish Development International. So in terms of, we were mainly looking for people to speak to about the game, but we didn't really have a decent platform to actually show the game. We were basically laptop out of a bag, go, please try our game, but there wasn't anything on display for anybody just walking past the play, which was a little bit. I don't really want to say anything too negative about it, because the SDI folk really put in a lot of effort and really helped us get there in general. So it's good value, but it's...
I mean, would it be fair to say that they're more business than expo?
Yeah, it's definitely, like, we weren't too sure how the split was going to be in terms of business to press to people actually playing games. As it turns out, it's very much weighted towards business, and nobody really cares about your game unless you're in the IGF or doing a talk or supported by like Nintendo to actually go up and play it, which was kind of disheartening, like I said, but it's still cool because there's still plenty of decent games on display.
Well, I think it's, I mean, for SDI they're a challenge, right? Because in the sense of they've got 20 companies, so why should they favour yours over ours or over theirs or over yours? They've got to please 20 people, 20 different companies on the same stand, and having a stand, I think, just having a stand, which means that having somewhere where people legitimately can go and come and see you it's just amazing compared to having no stand.
Yeah,
really
actually being there is just a great advantage of not being there. So even if we had to ad hoc a lot of the game showing thing, it was fine because we were there. We got to meet people, we got to show people the game that we wanted to show it, at least in the business side of things. With Resd, like I mentioned, it was more public facing, so we had sort of a computer set up, we stand there, we spoke to hundreds to thousands of people. It was a really different experience, so I'd say if you are a developer, it's worth going to sort of the two different types of things. Go to GDC, go to the talks if you get the chance to, meet all these great people and learn a lot of sort of how the game's business and how people are developing games. Then having the experience of people actually playing it, it's a weird feeling to have sort of things either validated or destroyed potentially, and how you're going to work around them and stuff like that. But both are great learning experiences, I suppose.
I suppose again, it comes down to what, in the same way as talking about the engine, idea is why you're going out there. You know, so you can go out there to learn, in which case there's lots of opportunities to learn, or you can go out there to try and promote or find a partner to help you promote your game, or, you know, general networking and so on. And so the thing is that in the same way that discoverability is actually one of the hardest issues to contend with in the App Store, as a business or an individual, that same thing applies. So you have 1 million apps in the App Store, and you have to try and rise to somehow become the one that people notice within that 1 million. That's pretty crappy odds. And in the same way that you've got tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people making apps. And so by being there, as you said earlier, you instantly improve your odds dramatically. The chances of serendipitous encounter rise from 0 to slightly better than 0. But that's an infinite improvement odds-wise, and that's the thing that you have to understand when you go to these things, is that, you know, for me, you know, I fill up a reasonable percentage of the week in advance with meetings that I know that I want to take, and then leave holes throughout the calendar to just have serendipity take its course. And frequently the best meetings I have, or the best results I have coming away from things like GDC, are the ones that weren't planned. It's because someone just met you, and then they thought that something you were doing was quite cool, and then they met someone, they said, oh, that's really funny because I just met this guy. And that's how it works. And then suddenly something that started there ends up being heard over there, and you end up getting a deal, you know, closing, you know, and it's, but the thing is that by not being there, by not being present and things like that, it's 0. There's 0 chance of that happening. So.
I mean, I think one simple tip that I would give is, if you are selling something, then make sure that you've got it for people to try. So I mean, if you're making a mobile game, then I guess that's relatively easy. If you're doing something else, then, you know, somehow get it onto an iPad, or like something that we did the previous year was we got a really cheap tablet as well as an iPad that we had, and we had a bunch of videos for both. And it just means that when you're talking to somebody about your product, you can stop talking, just show it to them. That makes a huge difference. Or invest in a really lightweight laptop, whatever you need to do so that you can just get it right there in front of them. But in terms of like serendipitous meetings and so on, I mean, mine was a mix. There were 3 big standout meetings for me over GDC, and one of them was basically planned in advance, but I didn't have any idea of what the content of the meeting was going to be. Another one was sold to me as just a social dinner with an old colleague's boss, and that turned out to be a very interesting business meeting. Half of it in Japanese, which was a pretty cool experience. And then another one was through a contact which just happened entirely at GDC, basically. So it's a big mix, but I'd also say, like, if you're just wandering around the expo, then I wouldn't expect to bump into many people who would really sort of make a difference for me.
Did any of you guys see the go through to South Hall to see all the experimental controller stuff?
There was a lot of that going on, wasn't there?
Yeah. Did you see
There was actually a specific the alt control.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
We could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
That might be interesting.
Because Lucky Frame were there with Raffle Power, I'm sure.
Lucky Frame were there, actually. You remember Robin Bone? Yeah, that's what he's doing now. He was on there. But anyway, so on you go. Talk. So.
Well, I certainly saw a little bit of it, but there was a little. I don't know whether anyone saw one of the Berg printers. So they kind of do these like receipt printers that you can buy for like £150. Anyway, so it was an adventure game. It was a text adventure game that printed out like you're at blah 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 blah. Where would you like to go? You know, press red to go north. You know, green for, you know, and then you just, and there was like a little 4 buttons up top, and you just press one of them, and then it would just generate the next bit, and you just get this receipt of adventure game, which I thought was quite cute actually.
I mean, one of the things is that GDC is now getting so big in terms of all the stuff that's happening around the edges. So for me, probably one of the coolest things that I didn't really give, I say it's the coolest thing, I didn't really look at it, I just went, oh, that's the thing that's happening, that's cool, was like John Romero playing Deathmatch Doom.
Yeah.
But, like, I mean, there's stuff like that happening all over the place, so I don't know if you guys sort of saw anything. So obviously, I think, Kate, would your pick for the best thing around the fringe be this controller thing?
Yeah, but only because I geek out and stuff like that.
Right.
I kind of go, whoa, that's something I haven't thought of before, and I would never be able to see in Scotland in the nicest way. Like in
What, you mean like the Lucky Frame guys?
Well, okay, there's one of him. There were like 15 of these other guys, right? So you don't see that collection all at once, and I think that's the thing that I kind of really like to go to. There were a big board games thing, well, big-ish, which was kind of cool, but for me, the experimental controllers was nice, and getting to speak to indie devs.
If you're passionate about games, then it's obviously one of the best places to go and roll, right? Simple as that. There's tens of thousands of people that are into the same thing as you. What's not to like?
So I guess we're sort of getting towards being ready for being done, but so I mean, we've got a lot of people in the audience who've maybe not been to GDC, or who are thinking about going because they're hearing about how cool it is every year because we do one of these roundup things, and some of them haven't got the hint yet. But I guess what would be your one piece of advice for somebody thinking about going, other than just go because that's a cop out? But you know, some tangible piece of here is something you need to know.
So I would recommend 2 things, and I always go on my own because I'm there for business. But I would try and take a friend, like go in groups. It's easier to go to things like parties and stuff like that and meet people when there's 2 of you. And the second piece of advice, because there are 2 micro pieces of advice, if you do go onto Facebook, search for Fellowship of GDC Parties. It has like all of the parties that you could go to, in which you could potentially, but I didn't, but you could potentially just eat and drink for free the entire week if you wanted to.
Okay. So this is something that we didn't really touch on, but parties wise, where do you need to be?
Well, I heard Blizzard were giving away a lot of really cool, expensive free stuff. So I think they were giving away like the versions of the World of Warcraft board game, which is like $90 or $100 worth. So if you've got room in your suitcase, you know, you could probably.
So Jamie's all about the money.
Free board games, you know.
I don't know anything about that.
So
Actually, you know, and I totally, I don't know how it happened, but I managed to not really go to it, even though I had originally booked up about 15 parties in advance. I ended up not. So I have very poor stories, no impressive anecdotes or anything. Many anecdotes from prior ones, but not from this one. I don't know in terms of advice. I mean, as I say, it's like going to Comic-Con or something like that. You know, it's, if you're going there because you're interested in something and you know why you're going out there. I mean, you're going to bathe in something that's interesting no matter what. I suppose it's a question of trying to understand why you're going there. You know, looking at if you're going to go to the talks, you know, sort of looking at the talks well in advance, making sure you know where you're going to be so that you actually maximise, you know, the time that you're there. Try and go to parties, try and socialise, try and, you know, find people that come and interested. What you were saying earlier about the summit, and you know, the summit is quieter. You know, there's less people there. You get a ton of people that are going to come in on the Wednesday or the Tuesday night for the Wednesday, and that's where it all happens. It just becomes very noisy and mental at that point. Whereas the Monday and the Tuesday, you know, there's a lot more sort of time for discussion, and there's just less noise to be, you know, going on. And San Francisco's a magic city, so, you know, try and figure out a way of seeing as much of that as you can while you're out there.
I guess the 2 things I'd suggest are Do as much networking as you can before you go. Try and make as many contacts as you can who are going over there, even if it's just through Facebook or whatever. Just try and link in with people for while you're there, because I think if you're on your own and you're just overwhelmed by it, then you won't get nearly so much out of it. And the other one would be echoing what you were saying. Go early to get over the jet lag, because GDC is pretty grueling as it is, but if you've just got off a plane, then it's crazy. I've tended to go like a week or two ahead of time. That's maybe a bit extreme. Yeah. I've got better with my jet lag since then, but you know, San Francisco is really nice too, so
I wouldn't consider turning up before Thursday, after Thursday or Friday. I mean, that's just my sort of thing, because like there's definitely things going to happen on Sunday anyway, so be a part of them.
That's true.
So there's probably something going to happen Saturday night, if you know, and again, if you're connected enough to people, there's stuff going on, and there's 5 people here who are probably going to be there next year who will be a little bit in the know. But you know, if you're there, you can maximise the use of that time. So even if you're spending a few extra days to get over the jet lag, it's not wasted time, and it's not necessary. It doesn't have to be holiday time. It can actually be really productive.
Or it could be holiday time.
Well, it could be. Why would you do that to yourself? No, work, damn it.
Oh yeah. Well, besides the whole get there early for jet lag thing, I'd say kind of similar to what Kate was saying. If you see something cool and the person that made it is there, go speak to them. Because it's half to the serendipity side of things as well. We ended up speaking, or I ended up going around and go, I know that game, that's cool, speaking to the guy that made it, and weirdly enough he knew who we were, which was kind of scary because, you know, we kind of nobody, but it was just like, through that we kind of ended up speaking to a few other people from it, and you don't know where it could end up. So I think the guy was in the Nintendo booth, and then we ended up getting like a few more extra things about the Nintendo sort of application side of things like that. But it's even like, say, the IGF, if you're going up there speaking to people about the different things, and they might know, oh yeah, you should speak to this guy, and oh, these guys are doing cool things. Even local people, like Scottish devs, because it is weird that most of them only really gather at that one point in time. I was actually weirdly speaking to an old lecturer of mine, Jonathan Sykes, who took his new venture out there, and he knows the people from something else who did all the audio games for the iPhone and stuff like that, Papa Sangra and that, and obviously I'm an audio guy, but it's my big thing is 3D audio and binaural audio, so knowing that I know somebody who knows them that can then chase up and go, oh yeah, you was mentioning this, is really good to have.
Cool. Well, that's about all we have time for, but thank you to the panelists for sharing their insights and everything, and if you want to accost them in the bar, I'm sure they'll be there. Yeah, so thank you very much, guys.